Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the delayed time. Even though we're starting a few minutes late, we're going to stay a few minutes after 5 to make sure we get to all of your questions and make sure that everyone understands the process. For those who may not know, my name is Shagun Idowu, and for the last 997 days, I have had the pleasure of serving as the Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. I'm kicking off today's conversation as the Mayor's Office for Consumer Affairs and Licensing, which contains the licensing board and is helping all of us navigate this process, falls under the Economic Opportunity and Inclusion Cabinet. Before we get things started and have opening remarks by the mayor, followed by some information shared by our team, just wanted to give we're providing this the first of what will be several webinars over the course of many weeks in various languages. And so before we jump into the discussion today, I wanted to give our interpreters an opportunity to introduce themselves, just so that all of the folks joining know who's on the call and who may be able to translate for them. So I'll give some space for our interpreters to introduce themselves.
Could we have the Mandarin interpreter go first? So you know what, Chief? I think because they're already broken out, that's where they are. So if anyone needs an interpreter, feel free to use the interpretation link at the bottom. We have Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, and one other I'm spacing on.
Sounds good. All right. If we click over to the next slide, just to set some ground information for this conversation. I know the first one up is around Zoom tips. For those who, I know all of us have spent several years with Zoom, but just as reminders, the mute button and the video button are down below to the left-hand side of the screen for when you might want to share some thoughts. But most of our conversation today and how we're going to answer your questions are going to be in the Q&A box that you'll see down at the bottom between the participant and the chat feature. And for those who need interpretation, again, the interpretation symbol is below, and our interpreters will be using the chat to communicate with you. And finally, on the next slide, as I shared, this will be mostly in presentation form. Our goal for today is to get as much information out there as possible so that folks have the basic level of understanding of what will be transpiring. But we welcome all questions as they'll help us to refine the process as we move forward. So with all that said, it's my pleasure. This is a very important moment for the city of Boston with the awarding of these licenses to the city to be able to award out to many of our entrepreneurs and small businesses. And so they will help us advance and achieve the goals that the mayor has set forth since her coming in 2021. And so we'll turn the floor over to Mayor Michelle Wu to share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Chief Idowu, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to our entire team. This is really an opportunity that, given the structure of our laws, doesn't come around very often for the city of Boston. And so it's really the first time in quite a number of years that there's been a significant infusion of new licenses, but also the greatest scale of licenses that has been absorbed in some time, with particular attention to making sure that these can be activating neighborhoods in the city that have historically had fewer licenses and due to structural barriers and lack of access, given the way that the system is set up. So most of all, I want to thank everyone on this call for what you do to create the spaces in our neighborhoods that everyone points to as what makes it feel like home, their favorite spot to gather with friends, their favorite place to celebrate with family. And to all those who are looking to open up these kinds of establishments, know that we at the city are so eager to support your every step in bringing that kind of not just economic vitality, but community building and a sense of welcoming to each and every one of our neighborhoods. And thank you to everyone who spoke up over the last several months and year to advocate for this legislation as it made its way through multiple checkpoints at the city and the state level, through the city council and through the state legislature, and ultimately signature of the governor as well. So we see this as a great opportunity, a unique and impactful opportunity that also has to be one we have to manage very intentionally to ensure that some of the goals of this legislation and that really drove the need to pass new legislation are respected and are met. The idea that we have to focus on creating new economic activity and enhancing and contributing to the need in different parts of our city, and bringing the opportunities for wealth building and economic prosperity to communities that have historically not been represented fully in these opportunities. So I want to thank the team for taking an approach that is thoughtful, consistent, and really taking the time through conversations like this to make sure as many people as possible know about it. So for everyone that is here on this call, we also ask you to help spread the word, share how everyone else can access this information, because we know that when one new business opens, we all benefit. And certainly when it's the type of businesses that we're talking about here, the ripple effects are huge all across our community. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu. Thank you, Chief Udowu. And I believe this is my turn to start talking. Hi, everybody who is here today. Thank you all for being here. My name is Danny Green. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Licensing Board for the City of Boston. Next slide, please, Kareen. Great, there, perfect. So really briefly, the Licensing Board is a 3-member board that regulates various business types within the City of Boston. Most relevant for today's conversation are obviously licenses to sell alcoholic beverages. And I share in the excitement of everybody on this call that we are so excited for the first time in a long time, there are licenses to be issued in the city for alcoholic beverages. For the most part, the number of liquor licenses in Boston are subject to a quota that is set by the state legislature. Earlier this month, after a successful home rule petition, legislation was passed to create 225 new liquor licenses to be distributed over the next 3 years. I'm going to go over the details of that legislation and the nuts and bolts of how to apply for one of these new licenses. Next slide, please. So on this graphic here, you will see the outlines of what is available in this newly passed legislation. I will detail all of that. So the majority of these licenses, 195 of the 225, are reserved for specific zip codes across the city. These zip codes represent the neighborhoods of Charlestown, Dorchester, East Boston, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Roslindale, Roxbury, the South End, and West Roxbury. You'll see a map on the next slide in just a second if that's more helpful. These zip code licenses are non-transferable, meaning that they cannot be sold on the open market. They must be returned to the board when the business closes or changes ownership, to then be reissued back to that same zip code, making sure that businesses stay in the neighborhoods where they are intended to be, where they're earmarked for, and where they were initially issued. Under this legislation, the board can issue 5 licenses per year per each of these zip codes over the next 3 years, which are broken down into 3 all alcohol licenses and 2 beer and wine licenses per zip code per year. Might be helpful to go back to the infographic slide. So in addition to those 195 zip code restricted licenses, there are also 3 new all alcohol licenses for the Oak Square section of Brighton. These licenses, just like the zip code restricted licenses, are also non-transferable and must be returned to the board if the business closes, to then be reissued within Oak Square. It's important to note for applicants that the zip code and Oak Square licenses must go to businesses that prepare food on site. This means that the business must have a food service permit from Inspectional Service and a common victualler license from the licensing board. The next category of new licenses made available through this legislation is reserved for community spaces, which can include outdoor gathering spaces, small theaters, or nonprofit organizations. The board can issue 15 all alcohol licenses to these community spaces, and these can be located anywhere in the city. Businesses serving alcoholic beverages under one of these community space licenses do not need to prepare food on site. Important to note, these licenses are also non-transferable and must return to the board to be reissued to another qualifying community space if the business closes. Finally, for the first time in a decade, the city's license quota has increased. The newly passed legislation creates 12 new all alcoholic beverage licenses that can be awarded in any neighborhood in the city and which are transferable. So once again, on the next slide, you'll see the map of where the zip code restricted licenses can go. These are the bulk of the new legislation. These are where the 195 licenses to be issued over the next 3 years can be applied for and issued. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about the process, how to apply, what you need. The good news is the application process is the same no matter what kind of license you're applying for, and mostly includes a fair amount of documents and meetings. All licensing authorities in Massachusetts use the standard Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, or ABCC, application. An application includes the application itself and what's called a monetary transmittal form. It's a checkbox where you check off the transaction that you are doing before the board. You need business structure documents from the Secretary of State showing everybody who's involved, depending on what the organization of your business is. Could be an LLC, could be a corporation, you could be a sole proprietor. Any of those will suffice for the purposes of applying for a liquor license. One question that we do get quite often is whether a space needs to be identified before submitting an application. The short answer is yes. We do need to license a specific premise. So you do need to have a space identified, and you do need to provide proof of occupancy of that space, which could be a lease, it could be a deed, it also could be a letter of intent signed by the applicant and the landlord. We also do require, the state actually also requires CORI authorization forms to do criminal background checks for manager of record and folks who have an interest in the license. The city does not run the background check, but the state does, so this must be included in your application packet. State law also requires that managers of liquor licenses are US citizens, so also a proof of citizenship is required in your application packet. A floor plan of the space that you're going to license, as well as what's called an entity vote. This is just a legal document showing that the person submitting the application has been authorized by the business to do so. The last two documents required with your application are an advertisement that runs in the paper once you have a hearing date scheduled, and notifications sent to your abutters in the mail. Licensing board staff will help create your advertisement that appears in the paper. We will also help you get your list of abutters and make sure you know the process for sending those out in the mail. Once the application has been found, once an application is submitted, licensing board staff will review the application to make sure it's complete. And we'll also make sure that you've connected with the Office of Neighborhood Services for any required community process. This usually includes attending an abutters meeting to tell your neighbors about your new business concept. Can also include flyering the neighborhood or presenting to a local civic or neighborhood organization. Once the application has been found to be complete and you have successfully completed your community process, you'll be scheduled for a virtual hearing in front of the licensing board. The only upfront fees associated with an application for a new liquor license are a $200 fee for the application itself, which goes directly to the state, to the ABCC. A $100 fee for the hearing that goes to the licensing board. And the last thing is $170. That is the fee that we have negotiated with the Boston Herald to cover the legal advertising requirement. Next slide, please. After your hearing before the licensing board where you present your concept, if the board approves your proposal and there's a license available, your application will then be forwarded to the ABCC for investigation and final review. This part of the process can take several weeks at least, and the ABCC ultimately has three choices. They can approve your application, they can reject it, which very rarely happens, or they can do what is called return no action, which means there wasn't enough information for them to make a decision and more work is required. If that happens, the application will be returned back to us at the licensing board, and we will work with you to resubmit any information that was missing. If the ABCC approves the license application, they will notify us at the licensing board. Once we get that notification, we'll be able to issue you your final license as soon as you provide 3 final documents back to us. One is a valid certificate of inspection from the Inspectional Services Department at the city. The second is a valid fire assembly permit from the fire department, only required if your capacity is 50 or more. And finally, proof of liquor liability insurance. This all may seem like a lot. If it does seem like a lot, licensing board staff is always here to help guide an application and an applicant through the process. That could be in person. We're right here at City Hall in room 809. It can be over the phone. It can be over email, or it can be during our bi-weekly office hours, which Kathleen will talk about in a moment. With that, I will turn it over to Kathleen Joyce, who is the chair of the Boston Licensing Board, to talk about how applications are evaluated and what the board is looking for.
Thank you, Danny. Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Joyce. I'm chair of the Boston Licensing Board. I'm pleased to be with you all this afternoon to talk a little bit about what the board takes into consideration when we review applications that come before us for a new license. Next slide. So one thing you'll hear us talk a lot about is public need. Public need is a legal standard that all licensing authorities in Massachusetts use to determine the suitability of an alcohol license in a particular location. We look at several factors. Some of those factors include the number of other pre-existing licenses in the area, whether the proposal before us is a unique concept in this area, whether there will be traffic and noise impacts, whether there's public support or public opposition, and we also look into the reputation, character, and fitness of the applicant. Next slide. The board takes into consideration additional things. What we're going to be doing moving forward is that we will be considering all completed applications received by us by December 6th as a group. In order to evaluate these applications, we will consider an applicant's core business proposal and how the license will advance the city's goals to support neighborhood economic development and add to our city's diverse and vibrant culture, including how the license would enable the applicant to enhance the cultural economic activity of the neighborhood, how the application will create new businesses and economic opportunities across diverse communities, how it will support wealth generation for less resourced entrepreneurs, and promote emerging and diverse businesses and communities to advance the city's commercial offerings. So people are wondering, what is the timeline for these new licenses that the board will be distributing? So due to the strong levels of interest in all categories of licenses, the board will review completed applications in batches. To be considered for this first round of new awards, completed applications must be submitted to the board by 11:59 on Friday, December 6, 2024. The board will continue to schedule hearings on a rolling basis, but we will defer our decisions on awards or on applications until all of them have been heard and reviewed. A completed application must include all required forms and any community process required by the Office of Neighborhood Services, which, as Danny said previously, generally requires a public meeting to discuss the proposal with neighbors. The board will hold its next round of review in the spring of 2025. If an applicant has already completed their application and/or had their hearing with the licensing board, please contact the licensing staff directly regarding the status of your current application. Next slide. We also have new transferable licenses. The city can issue up to 12 licenses for all alcohol service that has no geographic restrictions and can be issued to applicants with premises anywhere in Boston. These licenses are designated as transferable to another business, but will be evaluated on the strength of the proposal that is submitted to the licensing board. We expect these licenses to be highly competitive and will allow applicants to apply simultaneously for a transferable license that can go anywhere in the city and a non-transferable license, if eligible, to improve their likelihood of being issued a license. To achieve the city's goals, the board will give additional consideration to applications that include commitments to operate a business for a term of years. Further details will be published in the coming weeks. So we have been offering liquor license application office hours bi-weekly on Wednesdays from 3 to 5. We hope you'll join us. You can have one-on-one attention to your application from our very talented and licensing staff, and you can find the more information about those at boston.gov/licensing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Porcena, and I am the Director of Small Business for the Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. Thank you, Kathleen and Danny, for sharing some updates. And I am going to share some updates about what small business can do to support you before, during, and after this process. Next slide. All right, so the Office of Small Business is here to provide you support throughout the process, especially after the process. And so it's one thing to get the liquor license, but then the next thing is, what do you do after? And I think that's where we really can come in and support businesses. So we have a technical assistance program that we offer businesses support in certain areas. And so we have business planning and strategy. So thinking about, okay, now you have this license, what does that mean for your business? What is the plan? And we have advisors that will help you walk through that and set that up with you. We also understand that architectural renderings for businesses can be hefty costs, and Solicity has partnered with an architectural firm to provide renderings for small businesses at no cost. We also support marketing and social media. So now you want to get the word out about your business, you want to increase your customer base. This is a perfect way to use an advisor to help you gain more presence in the community. Website development, so continuing on the track of getting your business out there and getting the support out there. This is something that we can offer as well as legal support. So making sure you understand the certain compliance measures and also what this entails for your business, and then restaurant/food industry support. Who are the suppliers that you're going to be working with? How frequently do you need them? All of that can be also helped. And if there is something here that you don't see that you need, we are always willing and able to add on more advisors to our list to make sure that businesses have what they need to not only start and build, but to grow and really thrive in Boston. In addition, if you are a new or existing business and you would like a new sign, we also have a signage program that can help support your efforts as well. Next slide. So again, I think we can, Karina is going to talk about this towards the end, but basically what other support can we offer? There's walk-ins virtually and in person. We're setting up a host of neighborhood meetings for the month of October. And then we also have a technical assistance. So we just want to provide an opportunity for you as business owners to share what other kind of support you might need moving forward.
Thank you, everyone. As Alicia alluded, we do have, in fact, some info sessions that we will be doing in the neighborhood. Those dates are listed here, as you can see. And if you'd like to sign up for some of those info sessions, please use the QR code or go to boston.gov/small business. At this time, we will be, let me introduce myself. My name is Corinne Reynolds. I'm the Director of Nightlife Economy for the City of Boston, and that is housed within the Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. At this point in time, we're going to ask for any questions and answer them. And we have a great panel of folks, as you can see, everyone's very knowledgeable. So I'm going to remind you to please put any questions that you may have in the Q&A feature here within your Zoom. I will go through these and pick a few out for the team to answer. Let me pause my screen. Okay, so I think this one's a little bit of an easy one. Is the financial district considered a neighborhood? Anyone want to answer that one from the panelist team? Or I can answer it. Yes, it's considered a neighborhood. Everyone who has a business within Boston city limits, and if you are in downtown, if you are in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, that is a neighborhood.
Sorry, Karina, I was just about to say the
Yeah.
financial district absolutely is considered a
Yes.
neighborhood for the purposes of neighborhood services and community process. It is not covered by one of the zip codes for one of the new zip code restricted licenses, but businesses in the financial district, of course, are encouraged to apply for any other type of license, including the unrestricted.
So Danny, while I have you there, who is considered a manager of the alcohol license? If the owner of the business is a U.S. permanent resident, are they not able to apply for a alcohol license?
Yep, so on a license application and the license itself, one person is to be designated the manager of record. That is the person whose name actually appears on the license. They are the person who is ultimately responsible for what happens on the premise, for any violations that may occur on the premise. That person does need to be a US citizen, not a permanent resident. And additionally, residency requirements can also apply based on how your business is structured. So if you are a corporation or an LLC, then the majority of your directors or LLC managers must also be US citizens.
Thank you. Kathleen, I have a question for you. If a business only holds a beer license, are they eligible to apply for a full alcohol license?
Yes, they are eligible. Anyone can apply to for an all alcohol license, even current holders of beer and wine licenses.
Thank you. Does everyone have to apply by December 6th, even if you don't want or need to be considered until the spring of 2025?
You don't have to apply by December 6th. I believe the intent is to reopen applications for the spring 2025 review, and we'll have more definitive dates in the coming weeks.
Okay. All right, Alicia, I have a question for you regarding signage for new or existing businesses. Where can businesses obtain the forms to apply for signage? How long is the process from application to receiving the funds?
Okay, thank you for that question. So you can go on our website, cityofboston.gov/small-business, and look up the Restore program, and it will have information about signage. Just because you inquire does not necessarily mean you will be approved through our program for signage. So you really have to talk with the program manager to determine that. And depending on if it's a facade or if it's just signage, the length of time can differ. And so it's really up to the project that you're doing for support.
Thank you for that. What are the common pitfalls applicants face during the liquor license application process? Either Danny or Kathleen can answer this.
I'll let Danny get into some specifics if he'd like, but I'd also like to announce that on October 8th, we'll be running another webinar with the ABCC and the Mass Restaurant Association. And we'll be actually going through the ABCC's application live, and it'll be posted to our website, and we will be talking about common mistakes people make when they apply. That's a more technical, webinar that will be focused on the regulator side of it. So Danny, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head why people have their applications returned that might be helpful to talk about.
Yeah, the one I was going to mention, and again, it's not so much pitfalls. Our staff here does a really good job of going back and forth with the applicant to make sure that everything is, every T is crossed and every I is dotted before an application comes before the board. But one piece that does trigger a lot of back and forth is when making sure that everybody who is involved with the business is properly disclosed on the application. So we really do need to make sure that anybody who appears on your articles of organization with the Secretary of State, every single LLC manager, every single shareholder, everyone is exactly on your liquor license disclosed properly. Otherwise, that could cause an application to come back or require a whole lot of revisions in the process. So just make sure everybody who has anything to do with your license application is disclosed early on throughout the process.
Thank you. So on the 12 transferable licenses, will the city also have a drop dead date so that everyone is being reviewed before any of the licenses are being awarded?
Yes, I believe that was in my slide. December 6th at 11:59 is when you have to have your application in.
Thank you for reiterating that. Appreciate it. Okay, so someone asked, what steps need to be taken for those who have already been approved 2 years ago in the 02127 zip code?
Right, I see that in there. Hi, Brian. So, yep, you probably applied at a time when we didn't have licenses available. The board granted your application pending the availability of a license that didn't become available. That action was good for 1 year. We're now 2 years past. I think we should probably talk offline because there are probably some steps that wouldn't need to be taken this time around, like a community process potentially, but we would need a new application so we can connect. Feel free to reach out to licensingboard@boston.gov, all one word, or you can call our office and we can make sure that you get back on the list for a hearing soon once we get a new application.
Awesome. Let's see what else we have here. So someone wants to ask, they're curious as to why certain zip codes were used to determine the Boston neighborhoods. 02120 was excluded. So can someone give a little color as to why certain zip codes were chosen over others?
I can't. As a regulator, I'm on the regulatory side of it, but on the public policy side, I think this was determined at the city council level that these were the zip codes where there was a public need for additional licenses.
Alrighty, thank you for that. So what is the total time frame for the approval process for the license? And are there any additional charges for the license once it's approved?
So I can talk about the time frame. The time frame, as I said, on the front end is reasonably short. Your window, once you submit a completed application and have your community process, once we have that, the board will hold a hearing within 30 days. As Kathleen said, we'll be reviewing these applications after that first round closes, so in late December or early January. At that point, if the board grants your application and there's a license available, it will go to the ABCC for final investigation and review. That's the piece where, unfortunately, it's hard to give you a clear timeline of what that process might look like. It could depend on how complicated the application might be, if there's any issues with the application, if an investigator has to finds anything in kind of their review process. It's typically 6 to 8 weeks on the short end. It could be longer. Sometimes it can be shorter, but we will certainly let you know. Once we know what investigator you're assigned to, we can also let you know to make sure that you're following up with them on anything they might need to speed up the process. In terms of additional charges, so we have the upfront costs of the application fee, the hearing fee, and the advertising fee. Once you get your license, there's also an annual renewal fee, which does vary depending on the type of license you have. There's a base fee for beer and wine licenses that's right around $2,000, just under that. And then for an all alcohol license, it's $1,000 more than that. There's also a $1 per seat capacity fee and potentially an extra $100 fee if you're a restaurant that serves food. So we're looking at around $2,000 to $3,000 annually for your renewal fee.
Awesome, thank you. And then I saw a request for a potential info session in East Boston. I think that's definitely something we can look into planning and including it into our list as we do a tour of the different areas.
Happy to.
Okay. So someone said, I noticed on the requirements needed, the TIPS certification is not listed. TIPS, which is training for intervention procedures, certification is a training program that teaches people how to prevent alcohol misuse and maintain control of the environment. So is that a requirement? Why isn't that initially a requirement? And where does that certification fall in the whole process?
Yep, I can also, Kathleen, talk about this a little more on the violation side, but TIP certification is not a requirement in Massachusetts or by the city of Boston. It is certainly recommended. We do want all licensees and their staff to be responsible, to know the rules and regulations of the local board, of the ABCC, and of the Commonwealth pertaining to sale and service of alcohol. That specific certification is not required, but if something does happen to go wrong at the establishment, if a violation is found, one kind of mitigating factor for the board can be if the licensee institutes some sort of training or certification after the fact to ensure that such a thing won't happen again. Kathleen, anything to add?
I don't. You did a great job.
Kathleen, so say someone has a beer and wine license and they want to get a full liquor license, what will happen to the old license that they have?
It's been the policy of the board for the last, I'd say 10 years, that should someone apply for an all alcohol license and receive one, that they would return their beer and wine license to the board.
Thank you for that. And so someone wants to ask about the beer and wine and cordial holders. So everything applies the same for them. Is there a cordial license specifically that people have to apply that's included in this? Can you give a little bit more clarity on cordials and related to this process?
Absolutely. A cordial is essentially an add-on to a beer and wine license. So it pulls from the same pool as the beer and wine. All of the numbers earlier about the 2 beer and wine licenses per zip code, that also includes beer, wine, and cordials. So at the time of your initial application, you can choose to apply from the outset for a beer, wine, and cordials license. You also could decide at the outset to apply for just a beer and wine license, and later on attend a hearing to change your category to add cordials. That doesn't move you into a different quota. That's not the same thing as an all alcohol license. It's just an add-on to the beer and wine.
Thank you. And we have a question about managing the record again. So can a manager of the record be a manager on multiple liquor licenses?
Yes is the answer. Again, we would ask questions at the hearing level about how you, as the proposed manager of record of a subsequent licensed premise, how you would propose to manage both places, how many hours you were going to spend at each place, how you were going to basically provide the services to both places as manager of record. The manager of record is responsible for anything that happens at the licensed premise. It's the person who the board would call in an emergency if we needed to get access to something. It would be the person that would be held responsible should there be a violation, the person that's responsible for training. And so, yes, it's not unusual to have a manager of record who is the manager of record at multiple places, but we do dig into questions like, how do you propose to spend your time? How many hours a week will you be at premise A, premise B? Talk us through the staffing model, because public safety and patron safety is one of the biggest concerns of the board. So we want to be confident that the staffing model and security model in place is sufficient for both licensed premises or multiple licensed premises.
Thank you for that. How will it be determined? I know we went through some details of that, so folks early in the conversation, we asked about how it could be determined, but can y'all give like a quick and dirty reminder of how licenses will be determined as far as them being issued and whether it will be first come, first serve? And I could
So
go
it
back
will,
to that slide if you
yeah,
guys want
it
me
will
to.
not be first come, first serve. We are going to look at the entire universe of applications received by that December date to see which ones should be awarded these licenses. And again, our standard is public need, which means a variety of things. And we will be digging into the business concept. We'll be taking a look at whether or not there's a need for this particular license or business concept in this area. Can the neighborhood sustain it? Is there public support for this type of establishment? So we'll be going through all sorts of things like that as we analyze these applications.
Thank you. And
Thanks. I would also add, thanks, Kathleen, just because it's not on a first come, first serve basis, that doesn't mean you should wait until the very end to fill out your application, because we all know that at the last minute, the last hour, some things can go wrong. And so, we're getting out the information early. We're having our office hours early. Everything is happening in advance to make sure you're fully equipped and you have a very strong application that you're submitting. And so just want to reiterate that. Do not wait until the last minute to submit your application. Take advantage of the office hours, take advantage of the neighborhood meetings that we're doing. This is all in an effort so you can have the full information, so you can create a very strong application package.
thank you, Alicia. Appreciate that. Definitely heed her words. So I have a few location questions. The first is, I don't have my location yet. Can I still apply? And then the second one is, I have a jujitsu studio that people throw birthday parties at. Could I apply for a liquor license for that business?
Okay, the first question, sorry, was I don't have a location yet. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, you can't apply yet until you have a location in mind. Again, if the space that you are seeking or negotiating, the lease would be contingent on you getting a license. You can have a letter of intent that is signed by you and the landlord. That is okay. But where so many of these licenses are tied to specific geographies, you do need to have a location already identified before you apply. Second question about the jujitsu studio. Great idea. I think probably, depending on how often you are looking to have events in there, might be more appropriate for one-day alcohol licensing, which an individual can apply for up to 30 times in a calendar year. Happy to talk about that offline as well. If you are seeking to do this permanently, you're having events every day with alcohol, that wouldn't be one of the licenses that requires food to be prepared on site, but there's a category of licenses called general on premise, which means food does not have to be served. You certainly can apply for that. The board would have to do the same analysis of public need. Happy to talk about that offline and email, phone, office hours as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I have a few questions that I think have already been answered. Alicia, someone wants to know if there's some tax preparation help. Does your office offer that at the moment?
Okay, sorry about that. We do not offer currently tax support and help, but the center for one of the centers at the office of the Center for Workforce Development, I believe, offers it, and so we can put you in contact with them. And so if you want to just share your information or email our office, we can share that with you, or we could also put you in contact with a financial advisor as well. But there are definitely other resources and options we can share with you.
Thank you. What is a suggestion to let city know about what public need is? or let.
Can you repeat that?
So how could one business explain what their public need is? Is it through an analysis of the area, a story? Can you give us a few examples of how people
Sure.
have demonstrated public need?
I think I would start with a story. Tell us about your restaurant concept, what kind of food and cuisine you're offering. Is there something similar in your neighborhood? Are you opening up a Caribbean restaurant in the North End? Are you opening up an Italian restaurant in Dorchester? Is there other similarly sized restaurants? Is this the only small restaurant under 49 people with a bar in this neighborhood? Is this the only restaurant that will offer things like, you know, twice a night seating, or is it an interesting concept that you don't see anyplace else? You know, do you plan on being open for brunch? In most places in that neighborhood are mostly nightclubs. Are you offering something that people can't get someplace else? Like, is there a need for the public to have something that you're offering to us? So it can mean a lot of different things, but I think starting with a story is a great one. We don't require you to do an economic analysis of other restaurants in the area. We have the ability to pull maps up and see where all these other licenses are in the neighborhood. And we take a look at many factors, including public support, including, you know, is there going to be a place for the community to come and hold special events? You don't need that, but maybe that's something different that you're offering. Are you going to be the only sit-down restaurant in your neighborhood? That would be huge in the eyes of the board. I'm trying to think what else. Danny, do you want to jump in if you think of anything?
No, you're doing a great job. It really is about what is for the public good of that neighborhood, what need is not currently being met. And that's what the board's really looking for is where to put these new licenses to the best possible use and to the maximum possible use for the neighborhoods and for the operators that this was intended to serve, especially those who have been kind of left out in the process previously.
All right, we're nearing the end, but I want to get one more question in. Do you have to submit 2 separate applications if you are applying for both the restricted license and the transferable license?
You do not. It's one application, but a lot of times applicants will tell the board what kind of license they're looking for. I only want one of these neighborhood restricted licenses. I'm only looking for an unrestricted. A lot of times applicants will say, I'm looking for any license that may become available. The board will take that into account when they kind of do their analysis and figure out where is the public need best served by what kind of license. You do not have to submit 2 applications.
Awesome. And I'll take a few more questions since we did start a little late. Someone says that they have an event hall, and does the liquor licenses only apply to restaurants, or could they apply with their event rental hall business?
Yep, so it depends on the kind of license. Again, the zip code restricted licenses and the Oak Square restricted licenses, those do require that food be prepared on site. So those licenses would not be appropriate for an event hall where you're not making food on site. But sounds like it could be appropriate for one of the new community space licenses, or for one of the unrestricted licenses, or potentially if you're in a neighborhood that's covered by one of the previous rounds of restricted licenses that are still out there from 2006 or 2014, we can talk and see if that fits and is available there. So good question. Yes, you can apply. Yes, there are licenses that you would be eligible for, just not the ones that require food to be prepared on site.
Thank you, Danny. And there's a question about food trucks. Could food trucks apply for a liquor license or a beer and wine license?
Yeah, I see a lot of questions about food trucks in there. So our annual licenses really are only for brick and mortar locations. It is a premise that we license. We do not license on an annual basis anything that is on wheels. That being said, it may be appropriate for you to apply for one-time licenses if you're catering a special event from a truck or from a mobile enterprise. And also there are caterers licenses that come directly from the state that are called 12C caterers licenses, which allow you to cater private events anywhere in the state. You could, drive your truck if it is also licensed by the state. to the location where you're trying to cater. So this might be a better question for offline, because in general, food trucks are not eligible for liquor licenses, but again, on an event basis or on a catering basis, there could be a conversation to have there.
All right. Last question, I promise, folks. And then I just want to reiterate, we have included a lot of the contact information for both the small business team and the licensing team. So if you weren't able to ask a question, or you have a more discrete question, I encourage you all to please utilize that contact information, and we will be responsive to your question and your needs. I have one question here that is asking about if you get approved for a license for a restaurant in Boston and then later open another restaurant, can you use that license for the new place as well?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll let Danny get into the technical aspects of being able to have multiple locations with one license.
So short answer, no, your license is tied to your premise. That being said, if your new space happens to be directly next door, is accessible from there, they are completely contiguous, you can travel between the two, you could expand your premise to cover both. It's a really creative solution we're seeing a lot more of lately. The board loves, multiple concepts under one license, really maximizing the benefit of those licenses. But if you get a license, let's say in Roxbury, and want to open a new location in East Boston, the same license would not be able to cover both of those spaces.
Well, thank you so much for that. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about this opportunity and allowing us to kind of explain and demystify this process even further. As I said before, there are a bunch of resources that we shared in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. We are here to help and support you. If you have any ideas as to how we can share this information further, please contact us and let us know. We'd be happy to come speak at your neighborhood, at a community meeting, wherever you like us. We are willing to share the message, and I encourage y'all to share the information that you received here as well. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you.